Hello, friends. We're going on a bit of an adventure today. We are going to be canning some green beans. I had gotten a couple bags of fresh green beans at the store last week when they were on sale, and I've had them in my refrigerator in glass jars, and I am now ready to start canning them up to get on my shelf. I was really pleased with how fresh these still look after having been in the refrigerators for so long. So if you've not tried storing your produce in glass jars with a tight fitting lid, it really does seem to keep at least some kinds of produce fresher for a bit longer. So you might want to consider giving that a try. But today I'm ready to start getting those canned up and on my shelf. So they've already been washed and trimmed and cleaned. My jars have been cleaned and sterilized according to the new rules from the Ball Book of Canning. The lids and jars no longer have to be sterilized if you're going to be pressure canning or water bath canning for more than 30 minutes. So today we are going to be canning for 35 minutes, so I don't need to simmer my jars or my lids, but they have been sterilized and cleaned in the dishwasher, so those are all ready to go. I have my canner cleaned and inspected and filled with 3 inches of water in the rack in the bottom, so the jars are all ready to go in. I'm not sure exactly how many jars I'm going to get, but my canner holds 8 jars, so if I don't get 8 jars of beans, I'm still going to put 8 jars in my canner. The empty jars I will just fill with water to keep the rest of the jars in the canner from tipping over or bumping into each other during the canning process. So I'm really excited to share how to can up some green beans. They will be shelf stable for a long time as long as they're stored in a cool place so that the seal stays on the jar. They're good for a very long time. So I'm happy to share with you how to can green beans. So let's get started. All right, well, we are all set up and ready to go. I do apologize for the tight space that I have to work in. My kitchen's not all that big, but we'll make do with what we have. So here is a jar of green beans that I've already gotten started. Now we have the jar here that we're gonna work with. Let me get you turned down just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so what you want to do is just fill your jars, and you want about an inch of headspace. I actually think this may be easier to do without the funnel for today. So as you can see, I'm going to tip the jar a little bit. I think we can get more beans in there that way. So you're just going to get your jar as full as you can. You do need to leave a little bit of space to put your water in there, but you do want to get as many beans in there as you can get. Now I'm using pint jars just because I cook for myself, and a quart jar of beans would be way too much for me, and I think this is probably about as full as I want a jar of beans to be for me. and we'll just fill the jar up the rest of the way with some water when we get these done. So let's go ahead and we'll finish filling up the jars. I apologize for bumping you guys because, like I said, I have a very small space that I'm working in right now. You do what you can with what you got. So we'll just keep filling up our jars. We'll fill as many as we can. Now I also have a jar that I have had pickling for a little while. So it's just in some water and some vinegar and a little bit of sugar and some pickling salt, and I think there's a couple cloves of garlic in there as well. And I will get those out of the pickling solution, and those will make a nice side for a salad or to go with some meat. It will just make a really nice side dish. And I'm going to grab a smaller bowl here to put our beans in because they're getting a bit hard for me to reach. And I will bring you back when the jars are filled and we're ready to go on to the next step. Alright, we're back. As you can see, I have my jars filled. I did manage to get 8 jars of beans put together. I'm trying to keep these 3 jars separated because they're the ones that were soaked in the vinegar and sugar. So when I put those into the canner, I'm going to mark the lid so I know which ones are which. Now these next steps are very, very important. You do not want to skip any of these next steps or your jars may not seal properly. So we are going to fill a jar with water. To about an inch of headspace, which is about up to this bottom rim right here. Alright, that looks pretty good. And you want to take a tool like this. This is a debubbler. It actually is marked so you can tell how much headspace you need for your jars, and the other end you use to get into your jar here and get all of the air bubbles out. If there's any air bubbles in there, you're not going to get a tight seal, so you want to get all the way down there and get out as many of the air bubbles as you can. And when you do that, you may need to actually add a little bit more liquid, because as you can see, the water level drops a little bit as you move your food around there. So we're going to add just a little bit more water to make sure we have our correct headspace. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to add just a little tiny bit of salt. It's probably not even an 1/8 of a tablespoon because I'm just doing pint jars. You can add as much or as little as you want. It's totally up to you, or you cannot add any at all. And I'm also putting in just a few dried onions in there to give it a little bit of extra flavor. And once you do that, then you dip a paper towel into some vinegar, and you need to wipe your rim down with the vinegar. Make sure that there was no food, no oil, and nothing on the rim that would keep your seal from sticking. And it also gives you a chance to make sure that there are no cracks or chips in your jars. I have had lids fail because the threads on the jar were not even. So you want to check that, and you want to check the threads on the jar to make sure they are good. Now when that's done, you take your ring and your flat lid and put it on your jar. Now everyone says fingertip tight for the rings. I have found that that is not quite adequate for me, so I make sure my lid is on snug. You don't want to crank it on, but you can see that it's on there, but it's not on there super tight. So if it's on too tight, your lid is actually going to buckle a little bit and cause your seal to fail. So I am going to get these all ready to go into the canner, and then I'll be able to show you the next step. Oh, alright, we are back. I have all the jars filled and the lids and the rings on, and the rim's all right wiped down, so we're ready to go. So this is my canner, whom I've named Ethel, because like Lucy and Ethel, we've had some great adventures together. She's been a lot of fun. So I'll get her centered on the stove. As you can see, she is filled with 3 inches of water in the bottom. And here are my jars that are all filled. So now it's just a matter of setting the jars into the canner. And I did mark the jars that had the vinegar and sugar in the beans so that I would know which ones were which. And I ended up with 8 jars, which means I will have a full canner. So it's always good when you're canning if you can have a full canner, so that way you're not wasting electricity or gas as you do your canning projects. So we'll get, scoot these around a little bit more so I could get that last jar in here. You want to make sure there's at least a little bit of room in there for your jars. Alright, we have a full canner of green beans. And now it's just a matter of getting the lid on. Now this is a Presto canner. The handle is marked with an arrow, and there is an arrow here on the lid, and you just simply line the arrows up. But sometimes it is easier said than done, so you just kind of match the lid up with the trim. I think I got it. And you lock the lid in place, and you turn your stove on. I turn my stove up to about 8 because I'm using an electric stove. So I go to about 8, and you can see about where I have my dial set. Now what you want to watch for is here on this vent, as the steam and the pressure starts to build up, you will see a steady steam of this is so hard to say, a steady stream of steam will come up from that vent, and you will vent that for 10 minutes to give the canner time for the pressure to all escape through the hole and for the pressure to build up. And as soon as it's been 10 minutes, you will put this little weighted jiggler on it. And when this gauge gets up to 10, because I'm in Florida, I have to go at 10 pounds of pressure because I'm at sea level or below. If you want to can, you need to research your altitude and how heavy your weight needs to be in order to pressure can correctly. But when this gets, when I put the weight on it and this gets up to 10, the jiggler will start to jiggle, and then I will turn my stove down between 4 and 6 seems to be a really good spot that Ethel really likes, and it will keep the jiggler going at a nice steady pace. You don't want it to go too fast. You just want a nice even jiggle. And then we'll set the timer for 35 minutes for pint jars of green beans. So I will bring you back when I notice the steam coming out of the steam vent so I can show you what that looks like and sounds like. Alright, I don't know if you can see the steam coming out of the vent, but I'll give you a minute so you can hear what it sounds like. It's a nice, even, steady sound, so I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes, and you can see that the lock on the lid just locked into place. So we're going to set the timer for 10 minutes, and when that goes off, I will bring you back and put the weight on it. Alright, we are back. My timer just went off. It's been 10 minutes. So now you can, I hope you can kind of see the steam coming up out of the steam vent. We're going to put our little jiggler on. And we're going to let this pressure gauge get up to 10 pounds. When it does, this will start making a noise as it jiggles back and forth. And I will bring you back to show you what that looks and sounds like, and then we will set the timer for 35 minutes once that gets to the correct weight. Okay, you can see we've reached our 10 pounds, so I'm now going to turn the stove down to between 4 and 6, right where she likes to be, and the jiggler will slow down a little bit. And we want to keep that dial right around the 10 mark. We don't want it to get too high, and we have to make sure that it doesn't get below the 10 pounds, or we'll have to start the timer over again. But right now, I will set my timer for 35 minutes, and I will bring you back when the timer shuts off. Well, it's been about 15 minutes already, and as you can see, Ethel looks like she's really happy where I have her set. She's right at the 10 pounds of pressure mark, and the little jiggler's doing its nice, even, steady hula dance. So she seems to be doing really good. We got about 20 minutes left to go. Okay, we are back. It has been 35 minutes. I have my stove turned off. It will take Ethel a little bit to cool down. This part is very, very important. You do not want to touch anything on the canner until that temperature gauge is back down to 0. It will take a little bit of time for that to happen, but once that happens, then you open the lid. You very carefully lift the lid away from you, and then you just kind of tilt it and let it set a little bit to let some of the steam escape. That way you won't shock the jars when you take them out of the canner, and you're not as likely to get burnt when you take the lid off. So canning is a bit of a long process. It's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of just watching your temperature gauge. But it's so gratifying in the end to see the full jars of food. When you see me take these jars out of the canner, we will have 8 jars of green beans that I only spent $4 on because it was on sale, 2 bags for $4, and I already had everything else that was needed to put this together. So really all it cost me was $4 for the bags of green beans and some time. So I will bring you back when I'm ready to lift the lid on the canner. Okay, we are back. You can see the little pressure gauge is back down to 0, and the little safety valve in the back has dropped down. So I'll set you back down here, and I'm going to take the little jiggler off, and I'm going to very slowly and carefully open the lid. I'm going to tilt it away from me, and I'm just going to set it at an angle just like that, and we are going to leave it cracked just like this for about 5 minutes, just long enough to let some of the steam come out, and then I will bring you back and let you see what the final results look like. Alright, it has been long enough. We're going to carefully lift the lid off. Make sure that you lift it away from your face. So however you're standing, you lift the lid opposite from your face. And you need one of these jar lifters. It will make life so much easier. And look at that. They look fantastic. So let me move you over here so you can see the jars as I pull them out. Oh, that popping sound means we have jars that are sealing. That's what you want to hear. Look at those. Look at those. This is one of them that was in the vinegar and sugar pickling solution. Oh, I am so happy with these. This is just the plain. Look at those. Those look amazing. Those look like they are going to be absolutely perfect. And that's just the right amount for me to have a side dish with just about any meal that I want to have. And this was so much cheaper than buying 8 cans of green beans at the store that's loaded with salt. They're loaded with preservatives. Mine just had a little teeny tiny bit of salt, and it was good clear canning salt. It wasn't anything bad. It's actually a pretty good salt, and you didn't even have to put salt in there. I'm just so happy to hear jars pop. Hopefully we'll hear a couple more pop here in a minute. So you just carefully set them on a clean, dry towel. You don't ever want to set hot boiling jars on directly onto a cold countertop. You need to have them on something, otherwise there's always a chance you could shock and break your jars. That would be not be good after all that work and time to shock your jars because you didn't put them on a towel. So look at that. 8 jars of home canned green beans that will last for years on your shelf as long as they're stored in a cool, dry place and there's nothing that interferes with your seal. They will be good to go. And you can see we still have plenty of water in our canner. There was no siphoning, which means there was no loss of the liquid coming out of the jars. So that's a good sign that all the jars are going to be perfectly sealed. And I will actually bring you back tomorrow to show you the rest of the process. These need to sit overnight. They recommend 24 hours. And then I will take the rings off of the jars. You never want to store your jars with the rings on. You always want to take the rings off. And then I will show you how I wash, label, and date my jars. And that's how you can just pretty much just about anything. The only difference there might be is cooking time. Meats usually cook for 75 minutes for pint jars, 95 minutes for quart jars. So it just depends on what you're canning. If you're water bath canning jams and jellies or high acid foods, maybe 10 or 15 minutes under the boiling water is all you need. So canning, as you can see, it is a time-involved process, but there was nothing very difficult at all about what I did. So as long as you follow all of the steps, you can can your own food at home. It's so much healthier. You know what's in it. You know when it was made. And it's just so much better than buying cans of processed vegetables from the store. So I will bring you back tomorrow when I show you the rest of the process. I have the rings off of my jars, and every single jar has a good seal on it. If the jars didn't seal, you would hear something like this. And we didn't hear any kind of noise like that, so that means our jars are all safely sealed. So we can now go on to the next step, which is washing our jars. So as you can see, I have some warm soapy water in my sink. You don't want to use really hot water, just warm enough that you know that your jars are clean. And I have my labels already made and ready to put on the jars with what is in the jars and the date that the jars were canned. So that way we will know what the date was, and we will be able to rotate our jars out as the dates come up on it, so that we don't let anything spoil. So all we're going to do is we're going to take a jar and we're just going to kind of very gently wash around the lid to make sure that there wasn't anything that leaked out around the jar that would cause bugs or rodents to come in where you have your jars stored. And that way you know that you have a nice clean jar on your shelf. And then you just rinse it off with some warm water. Make sure that the soap is off, and then you just want to dry the jar off really well. Make sure that jar is nice and dried. And you double check your rims. As you can see, we have a good seal on it. That seal is not moving, so that means that it is on there and the food is not going to go bad as it sits on your shelf. So we have it all washed and labeled, and this is just a jar of the regular green beans that we did. So we're going to take our label, and I just used some plain old masking tape, nothing fancy. I don't use fancy labels on my jars. I just use what I have, and you stick your label on there and make sure it's all pressed on there really good. And there we have a labeled jar of green beans ready to go on our shelf. And that is really all there is to canning these up and then putting them away. So I will come back when I have the rest of the jars all washed, dried off, and labeled. And there you have it. We actually ended up with 9 jars instead of 8. So we have 9 jars of green beans. We have 6 regular jars of green beans and 3 jars of pickled green beans that I only paid $4 for because I got them on sale. And now we have 9 jars of green beans ready to put onto our shelf and enjoy all winter long. So as you can see, home canning your own food is not difficult at all. It's just a process that takes time. So all you really need to do is make sure that you understand the process for the food that you want to can, and just enjoy that process and enjoy the moment working with your food, knowing that you are going to have jars of food on your shelf to feed your family should you ever need it. So happy canning, and just learn a new skill, learn something new, at least one new skill a week, and before you know it, you will have a working prep or pantry that you can work out of and know that supplies are in your kitchen whenever you should need them. So blessings to all, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video.